South Africa, a beautiful, warm country filled with great stories and people. A place that is one of the most developed countries in all of Africa, with an amazing population of 50.59 million people, making up slightly more than 5% of the total population of Africa. And this country not only shares borders with other nations, but the vast open waters of the Indian and South Atlantic Ocean. Now, if you were to ask somebody to name the capital of South Africa, most people will probably answer Johannesburg, because it's one of the biggest cities and it just seems like the right thing to say. And even though it is the largest and most financially important city in all of South Africa, that answer is not actually correct. The truth is, in fact, South Africa has 3 official capital cities. Pretoria, for example, is the administrative side. Bloemfontein has control of the judicial side of South Africa. And as for Cape Town, it's the legislative capital of South Africa. South Africa is also quite a multi-ethnic and multicultural society. It has one of the most diversified cultures and languages in the entire world. And although in history there's been a lot of problems over race and culture within the country, the nation has 11 official languages recognized in the Constitution. Those are English, Afrikaans, Indebele, Pedi, Sotho, Venda, Xhosa, and that is Xhosa with a click, that's how you pronounce an X, Swazi, Tsonga, Swana, and of course Zulu, with Zulu being one of the most spoken languages. And as for South Africa, it definitely has a record, because there is no other country in the world that has as much official languages as this country. Now, South Africa is also considered a treasure trove for archaeologists and paleontologists. The country alone has produced some of the world's oldest and most valuable fossils to date, and of course about a fifth of the world's gold comes from mines in South Africa. And speaking about digging and moving earth around to find these treasures, let's talk about the ground itself. Because every year South Africa moves about 2 inches farther away from South America. And this is a subtle continuation of what is known as the continental drift. Now, when it comes to health and sciences, the doctors of South Africa have done something that nobody else has. And that is the first ever heart transplant was carried out in the country. This was done at the Sure Hospital in Cape Town. In 1967, the operation was conducted by surgeon Christian Barnard, and even though the patient died 18 days later, it was considered a success. This is because he died from double pneumonia, but his body had not rejected the heart. And from that moment on, it paved a whole new pathway into heart surgery, which has helped millions of people. Now, one thing about South Africa is there are some beaches that you can go and hang out with penguins, which I find very weird because I thought penguins really like the cold. Believe it or not, there are various breeding colonies of African penguins, also known as the jackass penguin. They are usually found on the western coast of South Africa, and one of the most famous places to visit these birds is in Boulders Beach, which is just south of Cape Town. With over 6 million trees, Johannesburg is considered to have the largest man-made forest on the entire planet. Originally, Johannesburg was considered a grassland, but they changed that relatively quick. This is because trees were planted in the 19th century in order to provide wood for the growing mining industry. One amazing thing that I always loved about South Africa is if you look at the map, you will find something very odd about it. And that is the country known as Lesotho, which is completely landlocked and surrounded by the entire country of South Africa. And although it is its own country, if you look on a map and talk to some people will say it should have just been part of the country. One other really interesting thing that is a coincidence within South Africa is it's the only country in the world to have 2 Nobel Peace Prize winners who had houses on the same street. This is Vilakazi Street in Soweto, Johannesburg, and the Nobel Prize winners that lived on that street were Nelson Mandela and Archbishop Desmond Tutu. However, South Africa is not just a place of science and opportunity, it's also a place of sport. With soccer or football, however you want to pronounce it, being one of the most popular sports within the country, South Africa was the first African country to host the FIFA World Soccer Cup in 2010. But that's not the only sport it can pull a record from. It is only the second country in the world to have hosted cricket, rugby union, and soccer World Cups after England. And not only that, but there is one other thing that the country can be really proud of. It is the only country in the entire world to build nuclear weapons and to voluntarily dismantle its own nuclear weapons program. And to this day, there is no country that has ever done it on a voluntary basis. South Africa may be on the southern tip of Africa, but it accounts for almost 25% of the GDP of the entire African continent. Its economy is twice the size of Algeria, which comes in second of GDP. South Africa, an amazing country filled with a diverse and rich culture with a great story behind its history. It is a country that has great interests and has some interesting things to teach us. It is widely believed that the region of South Africa had human inhabitants as early as 170,000 years ago, and this was in caves in the area known as Gauteng province, which most of you may already know is called the Cradle of Humankind. As it is not only inscribed as a UNESCO zone and is well protected, it is a location that has the remains of our oldest ancestors. But in 1924, they found the remains of hominin fossils. Now these fossils suggest that the sub to the Homo species, which include Homo erectus, Homo sapiens, and others, lived in the area approximately 3 million years ago. But to get to some really actual, somewhat documented facts, we gotta go fast forward all the way to the Bantu movement. Approximately 3,000 years ago, South Africa was a region that was a part of the biggest human migration in our prehistory. It was known as the Bantu Expanse, and Bantu is a word for approximately 300 to 600 different groups of people. Now this expansion took almost a whole millennia, and what happened was people moved from the west parts of South Africa all the way into the rest of the country, which led to the creation of the Kingdom of Mapungubwe, and as well other tribes such as the Zulu tribes. For example, the Kingdom of Mapungubwe lasted from 1075 to 1220, and because of them, the Kingdom of Zimbabwe was created as well. And for those who are wondering, the UNESCO inscribed Mapungubwe National Park was home to these people on Mapungubwe Hill. And during excavations, they found 24 buried skeletons of the people belonging to this kingdom. But by the time the Portuguese had landed, things changed much for South Africa. On December 4th, 1487, Bartholomew Diaz landed on the shores of Inwalfish Bay in Namibia. And by January 1488, he had landed in Groot River in South Africa. However, with the decline of the Portuguese navy, Jan van Riebeck and his fellow Dutchmen came into the country constructing a small settlement in Cape of Good Hope in 1652, which Cape of Good Hope is now called Cape Town. Now the Dutch had owned Cape Town until about 1795. This is when the British occupied Cape Town and many other colonies around it to stop the French from invading during the Napoleonic Wars. Now the Dutch really didn't agree with this. They moved off, created their own farms, their own communities, and they were called Boers. And eventually, with the accumulation of all these people being Boers, they created their own governments called the South African Republic and the Orange Free State, which pretty much acted as their own countries. And in the 1800s, South Africa was a complete mess. There were many civil wars. Britain also had a fight with the Boer republics in the First Boer War in 1880 to 1881, which resulted in the defeat of the British, only to have them return for the Second Boer War from 1889 to 1902, effectively defeating the republics who fought against them. And for 8 years, the British ruled South Africa until about 1909. This is when they introduced the South African Act of 1909, which gave the country some sort of independence. And on May 31st, 1910, the Union of South Africa merged all of the states together, creating one big country. But by the 1900s, things got even darker for South Africa. Because in 1948, the National Party, under Prime Minister Daniel Francois Malan, introduced apartheid, which was racial segregation, and this forever changed a lot of things within South Africa. One of the first laws that was put in 1949 was the prohibition of mixed marriages, which made it illegal for people of different races to either be sexually involved with each other or get married. And in 1950, they introduced the Population Registration Act, which segregated people into 4 different groups. You had black, white, colored, or Indian. And what was bad about this is, well, it segregated a lot of people. People weren't allowed to do certain things. There were different rules for different people of different colors and races. And on top of that, people were forcibly moved around the country because certain areas of the cities were designated by race. As a matter of fact, during the years of 1960 to 1991, there was the largest forced removal movements in human history, as 3.5 million people were moved from their homes to their designated places. And nothing really changed till about 1990 when the National Party decided to dismantle this Racial Segregation Act. As well, they lifted the ban on many organizations such as the African National Congress, as well as with the help of the great man Nelson Mandela, whom was released from jail in 1990 because of the lift of this segregation law. He assisted with President Frederick William E. Clerk to remove racial segregation, thus giving the first universal election vote in 1994. This allowed Nelson Mandela to become the first black president in South Africa, who replaced Frederick William E. Clerk. However, because both of them worked so hard together, they both received Nobel Prizes for their work. And although the years have gone by, Africa still may have some problems with race, political agenda, unemployment, and much more, but the people of South Africa aim to be strong and positive. And although South Africa has had its dark times, it has its very positive character traits too. For example, the Bukrans Bridge in South Africa stands at 216 meters above the Bukan River. It was not only in 1990 the first bridge to bungee jump from in South Africa, but it is also the highest commercial bridge that you can jump off in the entire world. And the oldest man to jump off this bridge was 97-year-old Morkeet. Also, South Africa must really love recycling because they got the Guinness Book of World Records for recycling the most steel cans. Collected from many different schools around the country, they collected 1,971,026 steel cans. That's pretty cool. Good initiative. Now, we all may know of Alcatraz in North America, the prison island, but it's nothing compared to Robben Island. This island prison held political prisoners such as Nelson Mandela and is approximately 3.3 kilometers north by south and 1.9 kilometers east and west. Now, throughout history, this island was used as a quarantine zone for leprosy, it's used as a prison, it also even had its own whaling station. But by 1961, it was used as a prison until about 1996. And by 1999, the area had been inscribed as a UNESCO heritage site, and oddly enough, this prison was home to 3 presidents of South Africa. They are Nelson Mandela, Kgalema Motlanthe, and current president Jacob Zuma. But let's move away from this little island that is in Table Bay and talk about Table Mountain, a weird looking mountain that one can see from Cape Town that is completely flat on top. And not only is she a national park where there's a lot of hiking to do, but it's a mountain that stands 3,558 meters above ground, and on top of the mountain, the rock is dated to be 450 to 510 million years old. They estimate this mountain is about 600 million years old and is one of the oldest mountains in the entire world. As a matter of fact, it's 6 times older than the Himalayan mountains.